I decided to make the video blog post, and the first discussion I will be talking about is the article Teaching Global Warming in Truck Country. I read the article and I really liked how the teacher realized what she was talking about, and then she realized she got herself into a situation because she was living in truck country. And she thought about the process, and when she thought about the process, she debated on how to go about teaching this without attacking her students. And she went about this process slowly and acknowledged the feelings of her students and where she lived and where she was teaching and the age of her students, which I think is a really important thing to do when you are teaching a subject, because you can't teach the gory graphic details about the Civil War to fourth graders. You have to be aware of the age and the setting, and like she said, she quoted that we live in truck country, and that the students were freaking out about their ATVs and their motorcycles and their trucks, and she went about the route of asking them how they felt first, and she said that acknowledging feelings opened the way for clear thinking, which is true. When the students realized what they felt and how they felt about what was going on in their area and what was going on in the world, they were a little bit more open-minded to it rather than being so, well, what about my truck? What about my ATV? They were more open-minded. And she went about the best route in teaching these students to, okay, well, how do you feel about this? And that's what really stood out to me from a standpoint, as I want to teach older kids, and they're educated. When older kids are educated, they have a tendency to maybe attack you, and she wanted to stop being attacked. So I liked how she went about the route of, well, let's talk about your feelings, and then we're going to watch a video, and then we'll do a project, and then the students got more and more into the subject area and into what they were learning about once she eased into it, rather than rushing into it as a whole and as, okay, this is what we're talking about, this is the lesson, and your feelings are kind of more, like, irrelevant, you could say. So I liked how she went about that, and it really stood out to me. Like I said, I want to teach older students. Well, the thing about older students is they are more educated in some subject fields because they are more understanding of what's happened, and they've gone through 11 years of school, so they've touched base on a lot of the subjects that will be taught again in the upper level grades. So, and then they have a tendency to maybe form the opinion. When you're teaching 11th to 12th graders, some opinions are formed. Opinions about some politics, like recycling, for example, like those opinions are formed. So it's kind of hard to go about an opinion that's already formed. And like, she was teaching students that like to go four-wheeling and that like to drive their motorcycles, and as she said, that I'm teaching in truck country. So she went about a really well route that stood out to me as something, instead of jumping right in the subject, she kind of eased into it, and then towards the end it paid off because the students were compassionate about the subject and wanted to do something and wanted to take an active route in it, and wanted to learn more about it, rather than wanting to just like, oh, okay, that's just another thing I learned in high school. It really impacted them. Even though they did live in truck country, it really made a standpoint on them. So I really liked how she went about that teaching, and I get that too, because I've been in that situation. You know, I drive a lifted Jeep, so you could say, well, Jeeps are bad for the environment. Why'd you lift it? Why don't you drive a Prius? So I like that, because my opinion about climate change and stuff my opinion's already formed. But when something is eased into it, like when I started learning about like the shark finning, I was like, oh, it's not that big. I've learned about this like a couple of years ago. It's not that big of a deal. And then when I really, really dove into it my senior year in high school, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a bigger problem than we thought. So I had that same like mechanism used on me about just kind of repetition, easing into it, and learning more and more and more about the subject. So I really like how she went about that, and that's something that I will definitely keep in mind, like I said, as I want to teach older students, and especially with me being so young, wanting to teach older students.